Je pense sans cesse à toi.
Hello and welcome to The Foretop. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot-button topics in food and beverage. I'm your host, Catherine Cole. We'll start off with a special treat for today, a Food Network star who will spill the beans about what it's like to compete on a culinary TV show. Then, for our second course, we'll talk laptop squatters. Are they bad for business or good for cafe culture? And finally, we'll discuss why kids should learn how to cook. It's not all about the food, but more on that later. Now, let me introduce our esteemed panelists here in the studios of OPB. Kyra Bussanich is a 4-time winner of Cupcake Wars on the Food Network. Welcome, Kyra.
Thanks, Catherine.
And Danielle Centoni is a James Beard Award-winning food journalist, cookbook writer, and recipe developer. Hello, Danielle.
Hi, Catherine.
And Laura Russell is a cookbook author, food writer, and recipe developer for Christopher Kimball's Milk Street. Hi, Laura.
Hello, Catherine.
Okay, let's start out with something sweet today, folks, and talk about Cupcake Wars. Even if you don't watch reality TV, you've probably wondered what it's like to be a contestant. Kyra Bussanich, you are the only person to have won Cupcake Wars 4 times, and we are dying to ask you about your experiences. But maybe you can start us out by kind of just describing the show for our listeners who haven't seen it.
Sure, Catherine. So for those who don't know about the show, it's a reality baking competition where they have 4 different teams, and there's different challenges for each round. And at the end of each round, the judges send home one of the teams. And when you make it to the final round, you have to build a whole display for 1,000 cupcakes, bake the 1,000 cupcakes, and then recreate the flavors that you've made in the first 2 rounds. So it's really intense and really stressful.
Oh, my goodness. 1,000 cupcakes?
1,000 cupcakes.
So I'm assuming you had to sign some sort of non-disclosure agreement before doing the show, but we want to know the inside scoop.
Sure. Well, what would you like to know?
Ladies, do you have any questions?
Well, first of all, do you really bake 1,000 cupcakes in that particular round?
Laura, that is probably the question I get most often. Next to, is Florian as mean as he seems? And the answer to that second one is no, he's actually a teddy bear. But back to the 1,000.
Florian
Belanger is the French chef, and he is one of the judges. And he comes across as being the gruffer of the judges, and he will definitely let you know when you've made a mistake. But he's also really quick to give praise if you do something well, and if you take criticism well. And I think that's part of the kitchen culture. But back to Laura's question about do you really have to make 1,000 cupcakes? The answer is yes. Yes, you do. And I have been on episodes where the producers called a timeout and they had to count to make sure that there were actually 1,000 cupcakes on the display because they weren't sure if people had fallen short.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
It's hardcore.
So how long does that take? Are you doing that all day?
It's a 2-hour round. So you have 2 hours to make 1,000 cupcakes. And they give you a team of assistants to help. And some are more helpful than others.
I don't see how even with a team of 100 people, I could make 1,000 cupcakes in 2 hours.
So, Laura, let me tell you my secret.
Please.
One of the things that I learned after my first experience, so the very first time I was on, I did not win. I was the runner-up. And I learned all sorts of things that were useful tricks for later. So one of the things that I learned is if you can have a base flavor, like a vanilla, that you can just split off and then do add-ins, that saves a whole bunch of time. And they have these giant industrial mixers. So you make a giant batch of batter, and then you weigh out 18 pounds of batter, and you add 42 ounces of fresh ginger or whatever your flavor is, and that way you have a different flavor, and that makes it so much faster than having to do batters from scratch.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Oh, my gosh. Well, and so when you watch the show, you especially, I mean, you are just such a natural on camera, Kyra, but when you watch the show, you're kind of like hustling around, and you're talking about what you're doing, and you seem to be explaining things very clearly. We've got to get this done in time for XYZ. And so are you actually doing that at the time, or do they go back and sort of film it again later?
I'm actually doing that at the time. And Jackie, who's my assistant on the show, she and I would practice talking and narrating everything we would do. Annoyingly so. So the week leading up to going down to Cupcake Wars, I would say, hey, Jackie, can you hand me that gluten-free vanilla? And, you know, because we wanted to work in that we were gluten-free and whatnot, that we were using good quality products. And so we would annoy everybody in the bakery around us as we're saying, hey, hand me those eggs. I need 16 of those eggs for this buttercream that I'm making. And now I'm going to do this. And just practice narrating everything we were doing.
And did they coach you in advance to do that, or did you just do that on your own?
That was something I just figured out to do on my own because our goal going into it was to win, obviously, and to impress the judges, but also to get the most airtime. And we figured if we were, accommodating and we were explaining what we were doing, then we would get a lot of airtime, and it worked.
So smart.
Actually, Kyra, that brings up another question, which is when they take you aside and you're looking straight into the camera, I don't know what that's called, and you're talking about sort of what the stakes are, and you'll say something like, my bakery won't stay open if I can't get some publicity or something like that. Did you kind of have to come up with some stakes, or are those real issues that you're grappling with that you're sharing with the camera? Yeah,
typically those are real issues that we're grappling with, whatever's on our mind. And I don't go in with any sort of preconceived notion. I just like to be natural and respond to the interview questions.
Wow.
What about relationships with the other contestants? I mean, I've watched every time you've been on Cupcake Wars, and I know sometimes the other contestants seem like they might be a little nasty or jealous, and I'm wondering, are there any cat fights backstage, or
I would say
everyone gets along?
Yeah, Laura, that's a great question. Less than being cat fights, it's more that people will try to snub you if they don't. But some people are lovely, and we've made some friends that we still keep in contact with from 8 years ago from our first appearance. So it really depends on who the competitor is and how secure they are, I guess, whether they feel threatened by you or whether they're just happy to be there.
Right. It's interesting how the personalities come off, because some seem very aggressive and very jealous, and others seem just very excited to be there.
Yes.
It's always fun to watch.
Yes, and you definitely find that.
Did anyone underestimate you because you do gluten-free baking?
I think everybody's underestimated us, Danielle. I think that was something that was really nice. I kind of like being the underdog and then impressing people. And I know on the last 2 episodes that I've been on, the Barbie and then the Ultimate Showdown, both of which I won, the other finalist had said something like, well, it's gluten-free. How good can it possibly be? Or, oh, you're the one who bakes all the gluten-free stuff. And then I win. And, I'm like, would you like to try that gluten-free cupcake now?
Sweet revenge.
Yes,
One of my favorite things about Kyra winning Cupcake Wars 4 times is not only has she won the most, but every single time she's competing against people who are baking with wheat. So she's winning essentially with one hand tied behind her back, which makes it even more fun for her fans.
Yeah, that's a good point, Laura. And in time trials, if I'm measuring out if I can bake regular cupcakes, I just have to measure out flour. But when you're baking gluten-free, you have 5 or 6 or 7 or more ingredients just to make up that flour base. So I'm definitely fighting against the clock.
Wow. So do you know the ingredients you can use ahead of time, or is that a surprise to you?
That's a surprise. You find out, and you have some time to think because they do lighting marks and they're doing sound checks and stuff, so you can see the inspiration table.
Oh, I see. So you can kind of sneak a peek.
Yes, I try.
Okay. I don't want to say the decks are stacked. Okay, the rumor is that the decks are stacked, and the producers already know who's going to win, and this is all a big setup. But you're kind of bursting that notion. You're kind of saying that this all sort of happens organically and naturally, and it is as you see it. But so the first time you went in, do you think the producers knew who was going to win? And
that's a great question. I don't know if they knew who was going to win, but I definitely think they thought I would go up in flames. And that makes for great TV because when I was on that first time, I was the only gluten-free team that they had on the show at that point. And so if they had gluten-free cupcakes before, they hadn't had mine. And, I don't think they had a real favorable impression of what that meant. And they thought, oh, let's bring her on and watch her go up in flames and, that'll be fun. And then I didn't go up in flames. In fact, the judges praised my cupcakes all day long. And that also makes for good TV because you have this underdog come in and just kind of out of nowhere and blow everybody away.
But wait, didn't you say, I feel like I was talking to you about this once, and you said when you came back after you'd won, they started putting you on a more central camera. Is that right?
Yes, I definitely had a lot more camera people around me.
Oh,
and
I see.
I don't know whether that was because they thought I would do better or because I was narrating constantly what I was doing. And so they wanted to catch what I was doing. And I tried to be really aware of what I say, when I'm on camera. And I remember the very first time I was on, I dropped an entire tray of decorated cupcakes. And thank goodness I had had enough, because that was the episode where they stopped and counted. And I think maybe the other competitor said, well, she dropped 250 cupcakes. She can't possibly have 1,000, but I had made extra. But I remember dropping this tray and thinking, don't say a bad word because you're on national TV. And so I said, oh, no. And I turned and walked away.
Danielle, you wrote a cookbook about baking. Is there anything that you think about when you watch Cupcake Wars that you think, how is this possible?
Well, baking 1,000 cupcakes definitely is one of those things I thought, how can people do this? And actually, I have a question for you, Kyra. Have you ever had an assistant that screwed up? Like, is that possible that an assistant could actually ruin things for you?
Yes, that's possible. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks for bringing that up. No, I remember the second time I was on, we happened to win, but one of my assistants had not baked before, and I don't think she was really comfortable in the kitchen. And I was trying to explain how to do a task, and it was a frosting. And I hadn't even given her buttercream, Italian meringue buttercream, which is a little more complicated. And I said, so whip this cream and then add this and add the mascarpone and the powdered sugar. And whatever she did, she totally ruined it. And so I tried to talk her through it again. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get stuff done and work on decorations and get the batters in the oven. And so I eventually had to throw away everything she did and said, here, just put these cupcake liners in the trays. And that was her task.
Where are these assistants coming from?
I don't know where they find the assistants, if it's just locals to the area. They tend to have a lot of the same people. So I've been on multiple times and had assistants several times on my team. And it's nice when you do that because you know what their strengths are.
Well, I think that since we've been talking about your delicious baked goods, we might need to take a little break and taste something. Did you bring something today, Kyra?
I did. I brought some mini eclairs.
Ooh.
Oh, those are my favorite.
Yes. So I have a box there, and it's just the pâte à choux dough with a diplomat cream inside, which is part pastry cream and part whipped cream, and then a chocolate glaze over the top, chocolate ganache.
And what's that dough again?
It's a pâte à choux. It means cabbage paste, I guess. It's it's what we make our cream puffs out of.
Well, I think we should all take a bite and make sure, it's okay.
There's one for everybody.
I have a feeling this is going to be
It's going to be a little
delicious.
messy, so I apologize. I didn't think to bring napkins, so sorry, Danielle.
Oh, my goodness.
Passing them around. So these are something we have done cream puffs in kind of a mini muffin size. And we've been getting a lot of requests, not for cream puffs, but for eclairs for weddings. And so we started playing with the recipe so that we could pipe it out. So I apologize for the mess everywhere.
So eclairs for, they make a wedding cake out of stacked eclairs?
No, they just like to do dessert bars. So we have a lot of brides and grooms lately who are looking for a small centerpiece cake and then hand pies or custom cookies or, something a little unique. Pavlova. We've been doing a lot of mini Pavlova type things. Catherine's mouth is full, so she can't talk.
Well, I love this, of course, because having been gluten-free for almost a decade, I know that it is nearly impossible to find a gluten-free eclair. And this one is especially delicious. I love that pastry cream in the middle and the little vanilla specks. So I love it.
Thanks, Laura.
You're welcome.
You'd never know that was gluten-free. It's so good.
Thank you, Danielle. That's what I like to hear. When people say, oh, this is good for being gluten-free, I automatically feel like I've failed.
Right.
Wow. I can't even speak because I'm just enjoying this so much. Thank you so much for bringing these, Kyra.
My pleasure.
Well, this makes me want to go back and rewatch all those episodes. I've already watched them once, but it seems like such sweet success if you're not only winning, but you're winning with gluten-free ingredients and you're making delicious, delicious desserts.
Well, thank you.
Now, I think we're going to move on to our second course, which is laptop squatters. We have all been there. You have arranged to meet someone for coffee at 9 a.m., only to arrive at a cafe in which every seat is taken, everyone's typing, and yet no one appears to actually be eating or drinking anything. Some coffee spots are striking back, with time limits on Wi-Fi or even no laptop rules. Danielle Centoni, I know that you, like me, enjoy getting some work done in a caffeinated environment, so I'm going to toss this topic to you first. What is the current state of laptop squatting?
I would say it's pretty fraught still. I am an occasional laptop squatter, mainly because, I have plenty of Wi-Fi at home, and I think the reason why I do it, it's a way to keep myself from procrastinating. When I'm at home, there's laundry I could be doing. There's another snack I could be eating. There's always something I could, do to keep myself from actually doing work. But when I go to a cafe, I can actually focus. Even though there's people all around, I feel like I can actually focus. And I think that's why most people do it. They want to be out of the house. They want a change of scenery. The problem is that cafe owners feel like they're losing money, and they probably are. Even if you, let's say I spend 4 hours at a cafe and order a couple things. If I had just been there without my laptop, I probably would have stayed maybe an hour, and then that table could have turned, 4 times in those 4 hours. So it is a problem, I think, for cafe owners. And there's different ways they're, dealing with it. Some unplug the Wi-Fi, and they don't even offer it at all. Some have even banned screens, like you can't even bring your laptop in at all. Some turn the Wi-Fi off during peak hours, like lunchtime, to make sure that, if you are going to come and work, you're just going to do it on the non-busy times. They've hidden their power plugs. There's all sorts of things people have done. So I think there's kind of like a little bit of a laptop squatting war right now. But in bigger cities like New York and San Francisco, you get a lot more of these co-work spaces that look like a cafe, but they're actually meant for you to come and do work. And you could either pay a monthly fee, some are an hourly fee. And I think that's definitely helping. It gives the independent worker a place to go that feels convivial, but you're not actually taking up a seat that could be, used by someone else who wants to come and actually converse with someone and have a cup of coffee. So I don't know, Catherine, you said you go to cafes a lot?
I do, and it is interesting because we're supposedly in this era where no one needs to actually be in the office. We're all wired. And I want to make a pun about drinking coffee and also being wired, but I won't go there. I'm not going to go there. But it is true, there's some basic human need to be around other human beings if you're trying to be productive. And I don't know what the explanation is. I'm sure there's an anthropologist who could tell us what that is. But yeah, sometimes if you just also I do know that if you just change your surroundings, if you're kind of in a place in your work where you're stuck and you just change your surroundings, sometimes that can get you out of that rut. So, yeah, I totally squat. Not every day, maybe once a week. And also, I find it very helpful if I'm going from one place to another. They're on opposite ends of town, and I have an hour in between. It doesn't make sense to go back to my home office. It makes more sense to just stop somewhere and get some work done in between.
I think an hour is one thing, and I think that's still pretty acceptable. But, there are a lot of people who are truly setting up shop. And some of these smaller independent coffee shops, they might only have 20 seats.
Yeah.
My favorite is when I go to a coffee shop and someone has set up shop at a 4-top. So they're not just taking a seat, they're taking 4 seats, essentially. And I think that's when it gets into really tricky territory for the cafe because they're selling a $3 or $4 product.
And so this person's got their paper spread all over the place.
Right. So they're not just taking up that seat for 4 hours. They're taking up 4 seats. And like Danielle said, maybe that would turn once an hour, maybe even 45 minutes. So then you're talking about that person's taking up essentially 20 seats. And maybe they buy a $3 cup of coffee or a $4 cup of coffee. But I don't see how it can work. I'm kind of on the side of these cafes who are either shutting down the Wi-Fi or limiting it.
Laura, there are some cafes I've heard that I've been to where they give you a code for the Wi-Fi and it expires after an hour. How do you feel about something like that?
That's a good idea. I think that's a good solution. And not all coffee shop owners or cafe owners are on the same page with this anyway. I know here in Portland, Billy Wilson, who owns Barista, has sort of famously started Twitter wars about this, and, that he doesn't think that he should provide Wi-Fi in the cafes. And then my friend Sam Purvis, who owns Good Coffee, is one of the owners. He's all for it. He thinks that that's part of the deal. And if you create a shared space, that it's meant for that type of social situation. So it's controversial even among the coffee owners, I think, the shop owners.
Kyra, do you have free Wi-Fi at your bakery?
We do, and we don't limit it. We just let people camp out at the foretop for 4 hours. and it happens. I see it.
And does it frustrate you? Do you get in moments where you see that there are customers waiting for a table and someone's just sitting there and you want to say something? Has that come up before?
I have never said something. There have been times that, yes, I've maybe bit my tongue because I see somebody with all of their stuff spread out over a 4 or 6 top even, and we have a lunch rush or people coming and waiting. But I haven't said anything because I also want this to be a place that people feel comfortable coming. And I think part of that is providing Wi-Fi, and I'm happy to have them there, especially when we're slow.
Yeah. What do y'all think of a sign, just a kind of a sign on the wall that says, please respect a 1 hour limit or something like that?
People don't read.
No.
No, they don't read. And I do think there's some coffee shop owners have said that just, when you walk into a cafe and you see everyone's in front of their laptop and there's just screens everywhere, it's kind of a vibe killer. You don't open a coffee shop to have everyone come in and not talk to each other. You open it because you want a gathering space, a social place. And when everyone's just there working, it's kind of contrary to what you try to, produce. So I think that the places that have banned screens for sure, it's because they want you to come and talk to people and have that social experience. And when there's a bunch of laptops and it sounds like a library, then, it's counterproductive to what they're trying to do.
I feel like I've had this experience possibly with you. I know in the last year I've gone to meet someone for coffee, and I won't say that we were shushed, but definitely getting a vibe from the person next to us, by having a conversation, we were annoying him because he was working. And you can't get into that. I mean, at that point, why not? Why doesn't that person go to the library? There's plenty of people there, and
exactly.
That's what it's for. But I really worry about that when people who want to go for a coffee date or meet some friends are feeling like the outcasts for speaking.
That's a good point, Laura. I've had that happen before where when you meet someone for coffee, often it's to kind of spill your guts about your personal life.
Yeah.
And it feels very strange. So many of these very small coffee shops, the tables are very close to each other. So you're practically brushing elbows with the person next to you and talking about something very personal, and they're typing and you're thinking, A, I'm distracting them, and B, they're totally listening in, and you just wish they had their own conversation going on.
Or you can turn to them and draw them into the conversation and say, oh, yeah, you like that? I saw you laugh.
Oh, my. I guess that's why they've left their house, though, right? Get some work done and eavesdrop on other people's conversations.
Yeah. Enjoy that schadenfreude. Well, anything else anyone wants to add about this scintillating topic, laptop
Well,
splitters?
I do think if you are going to go to a coffee shop and work, that you have to not just consider what you're doing there, but what are the other customers? Do they want to walk into a coffee shop full of people working? Do they want to walk in and hear you on your job interview with someone or your networking date? Coffee shops are not a business office. And so I think we all need to be a little more sensitive to what they really are for and have, better etiquette, I guess, not stay as long.
I like it. I think we're all in agreement here. Well, let's move on to our third course then, and that is cooking with kids. This is a subject that's near and dear to our hearts here on the Foretop, and all of you three ladies have personal experience in this arena. But before we delve deep into the subject, maybe Laura Russell can get us rolling. Laura, your daughter was invited to the White House a couple of years ago after winning a national cooking competition, so you clearly have a knack for teaching kids how to cook. What are some basic skills all children should be learning?
Well, I'll say I definitely left that visit to the White House 4 years ago feeling very, very inspired by Michelle Obama and her Let's Move initiative to start cooking with kids. While I was there, I all these kids are so excited and they've created these beautiful dishes. And I just had one of those aha moments where I thought, it's this age group. It's cooking with young kids and introducing them to food that is going to get us out of this obesity crisis. Because you have to get these ideas in their heads early. So anyway, last year I decided to do a little experiment, and all the first and second graders at my daughter's school had planted a garden, and they planted broccoli and cauliflower and kale. And I said to the teacher, well, what if we did a big tasting so we could talk about all the vegetables and the kids could test them. And we had 4 stations set up. Each one had a raw vegetable and a cooked vegetable. So these kids were tasting kale, cauliflower, radishes, arugula, kohlrabi, some really, really challenging vegetables, just raw arugula, the spicy radishes. And there were 80 kids there, and not one of them, they were all eating. They were all loving the food. And we sent the recipes home, and I got emails from the parents saying, how did you get them to eat that? And I just said, I didn't do anything. They were curious and engaged, and the kids want to taste these foods. They want to try new things. And I realized that a big part of the problem is the parents and their biases toward the kids, what kids will eat. Anyway, it all brings it back. So I think cooking with kids, introducing them to healthy foods, teaching them knife skills, which is critical, really helps them to have a sense of ownership and pride about how they're cooking, and it makes them want to eat the food. That's a long way of saying if they do it themselves, they'll be more likely to eat healthy foods. But there are so many more reasons to cook with kids. I know, Danielle, you cook a lot with your daughters. They're good eaters. At least one of them's a good eater for sure.
Not as good as yours.
But like, what are some of the other things other than just the physical learning how to cook that you think your kids are getting from cooking?
Well, one interesting thing that has happened is they have learned to respect the meal. So many times I'll cook a dinner, they don't like it, whatever. And they used to complain and give me a hard time about it and make them eat it anyways. Well, once they had to start cooking with me, like one time in particular, my youngest daughter was cooking dinner with me, and we served it up, and my oldest daughter complained about it. And my youngest daughter was so hurt that her sister was, scowling at her dinner plate that she, helped cook. And then it happened the opposite, where my oldest daughter was helping cook, serves up the dinner, and the youngest is now angry and scowling at her dinner plate. And so they've learned to be kinder and more empathetic with cooking, with things that we provide to them. There's been many, many times now that my oldest daughter hates chicken for some reason. And she has learned we have chicken about once a week. And she looks at her plate and her face falls. And then she looks up at me and says, "Thank you."
Oh, wow.
But my question
is so great.
Does she still eat it?
She still eats it.
She does?
Yes.
That's great.
Because she knows there's no alternative.
And so they're really appreciating the work
Yes.
then that went into the planning and the cooking of the meal.
Because they've had to do it themselves.
Right.
I used to complain about the meals that my parents cooked for me when I was younger. And about the time I was 12, my mom said, if you don't like what we cook, then you can cook dinner for the family. And so each week I would pick the 2 days a week I was going to cook, and I would make out the shopping list, and they would buy the ingredients, and I would cook dinner for everybody. And that both taught me a lot about the kitchen, and it got me more interested in cooking and baking. But it also, like you said, taught me the empathy and how much work goes into putting a meal on the table.
And now you mentor kids, don't you, Kyra?
I do, yes.
Tell me about them.
Well, right now I have a high school senior, and I'm training her about baking with cupcakes. She decided for her senior project she wanted to put on a Cupcake Wars. And so I kind of interviewed her and figured out what things she was interested in and selected a topic and an inspiration theme and 7 different ingredients. And I said, you need to use 4 of these. Give me 3 dozen cupcakes, recipes for that. And then we came and baked them together. And I baked them according to how she wrote them, even though I knew better in some cases. And it was a good learning experience for her because she would see, maybe don't dump all of the flour in all at once right away.
So they're kind of learning reading comprehension as well, because recipes are actually quite complicated. I mean, those of us who cook a lot don't think about it, but you really do have to read all the way through it and think about each step and really comprehend the whole process before you even get started.
Absolutely. And not every recipe is written well. Not
No.
every recipe is clear and makes sense.
Right. And I think for the younger kids, like you said, the reading comprehension and math. I mean, my daughter will say, and she cooks pretty independently, but if she's baking, she might say, it calls for a tablespoon and I only have a teaspoon. How many teaspoons are in a tablespoon? And, she'll start multiplying the recipe. So I think there's a lot of just everyday basic skills to be had from cooking other than just, producing something to eat.
I came across this book that sounds great. I haven't read it yet. That's called The Danish Way of Parenting by Jessica Alexander. And I read an excerpt from it that said that Danish schools all have this thing called Klassen Time Kage. I pronounced that wrong, but it's called the class hour cake. And it's a weekly part of the curriculum. And every week a different kid brings in a homemade cake and they just sit down and talk about how they're getting along kind of socially as a class. And they kind of work through a bunch of problems. And also they kind of learn empathy from the experience of it's not easy to bake a cake for, 20 other kids. So I think that's a really neat tradition. I wish we had something like that.
Yeah, it also sounds almost like a mental health hour.
Yeah.
They can bake a cake and then all, share what they need to share.
Yeah.
Well, I will give a push, as we've done so many times on this show, but I would love to see the return of home ec.
Yes.
Oh,
I mean,
me too.
if kids aren't learning to cook at home, the only other place to learn how to cook is at school. And programs like that would be so beneficial, maybe even at the middle school level.
That's an interesting point, Laura. And the shows like Food Network and Cooking Channel and things like that used to teach you how to cook, or you would watch someone make this whole meal from start to finish on air. And now it's mostly game shows. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, because I definitely am appreciative of my experiences. But I used to watch those religiously and tune in and see what Sarah Moulton was making or Gail Gand. Long time ago. And those really have gone by the wayside.
And Kyra, I think I read that a third of the viewers of the Food Network are actually children. I do know a lot of kids love Cupcake Wars.
Yes, I think that's probably accurate.
So I guess the game show format is enticing to them, but wouldn't it be great if they were actually, like you said, learning some skills?
Absolutely. And there's some interesting new shows now that kids are cooking on, the Kids Baking Challenge and Cupcake Wars Kids, which I think is really interesting and getting kids back in the kitchen. But I definitely think that there's more than just baking out there. Everybody loves cake, and baking is really fun. But like Laura was saying, learning how to cook vegetables and learning knife skills and how to pan roast a chicken are things that are really important.
Yeah.
I'm actually very optimistic. I mean, the kids are really watching the cooking shows and wanting to get involved. But I also think 20-somethings right now, there's really a resurgence in cooking among these younger people, and things like Tastemade, quick hit videos where they can learn how to make a whole dish, where I would have needed to watch a whole show years ago. They can watch this minute-and-a-half video and they're cooking dinner. dinner. I think I'm really encouraged by that.
I love those videos.
I have a friend with a 4-year-old, and what she does is every time they go grocery shopping, she lets her 4-year-old pick out something that's not sugary to try, so a new ingredient. And that's how she gets him to try things like broccoli rabe and kohlrabi and rutabaga, some of the stuff she's thinking, oh, what do I do with this? But, it just makes him a little bit more adventurous because he's chosen the ingredient, which I think is a really cool idea.
And I also love those programs that bring kids together with a community service element where they're cooking and they're also sharing. I mean, once again, getting back to the empathy point we were making earlier. And Danielle, I know you did something like that with your kids, didn't you?
Yeah, I led a Girl Scout troop for a couple years, and I had heard through the Unitarian Church in my neighborhood that they were doing these dinners for a homeless family shelter that was at a church nearby, a different church. And so I asked if our troop could cook dinner one night. And so we went to another church that had a kitchen that we could use, big commercial kitchen. And we made lasagna from scratch, a bunch of them, totally from scratch, sauce and everything, and carrot cake muffins and salad. And then we brought it to the homeless family shelter and served it. And so the kids got to learn, they got their cooking badge, and they got to learn a lot about, teamwork and also, how to prep, vegetables or whatever. Kitchen sanitation was also important during this session. And then when we were serving it, they got to see that homeless people are not just the people in the corner, begging for change. They're families just like us. And they got to play with the kids that were there staying at the shelter. We parents got to talk to their, those other parents there. And the pastor took me aside and told me that generally it's, senior citizens that are coming and supplying food for these things. And he said it was really important that the homeless families got to see that their peers cared about them and took time to provide a meal and some companionship. And it was important for these kids to see that other kids cared and wanted to share something with them. And so it was a great experience for all of us. And I know that our kids learned that, homelessness can happen to anyone. And even if you can't buy someone a house, you can give them your time and your compassion. And it made a huge impression on us. We still talk about it.
What a great experience.
That is so cool, Danielle.
And I love that you didn't, I was thinking, are there any programs, national programs that do that? But you just made your own program. You just made it happen. That's so inspirational. Wow.
Well, luckily I was, I knew these people at the church that kind of hooked me up. So you have to know where the opportunities are. That's half the problem.
Oh, that's so heartwarming. Well, I like ending there because it feels very upbeat. So let's move on to our dessert course in which we each share something that we've been enjoying this week. And I'll go first just to get it over with. As long as we're talking about the Food Network, I'd like to recommend the book From Scratch by Alan Salkin. I just finished it. A lot of it focuses on the building of the business of Food Network, but toward the end, you get a lot of interesting insight into the big personalities who kind of made that channel what it is. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I'm actually not a big food TV watcher, but I'm very interested in the politics behind the scenes. So it's a kind of a fun read for that. Laura, what about you? Do you have a dessert for us?
I have a dessert. It ends well, although the story wasn't great. So with all the shocking, terrible news over the past few weeks, it was interesting to me that the story that almost put people over the edge was that there was a rumor of a 2017 bacon shortage. So there was a USDA report, which was boosted by the Ohio Pork Council, that claimed that the frozen pork belly inventory was at its lowest point in half a century. The Pork Council even created a website, baconshortage.com. But as it turns out, those were just reserves. There's no need to panic. Pig farmers have confirmed that they are rising to the occasion and going to meet the demand, if not exceed by 3%. So no one has to worry. There will be plenty of bacon in 2017.
Leave it to Americans to freak out about the bacon.
Yeah, with everything else going on.
Not the future of the universe.
That's right.
All right, Danielle, how about you?
I don't know, I hope this isn't like a plug for a product, but I have fallen in love with this silicone bowl that's a popcorn popper. You just put popcorn kernels at the bottom and you microwave it, and you get this delicious microwave popcorn without, having it, with grody additives from the store. The company's called Lekue, and it's Spanish. And
can you spell it?
Lekue. And so they do all this silicone stuff. And this thing, it collapses, which is also amazing because I don't have any more room in my fridge. So this collapsible bowl, you just, pull it up, put some kernels in the bottom, a little bit of oil, pop it for 3 minutes, and there you go. And I love it.
That's fun.
I love it so much.
I love that. It's so fun to experiment with popcorn because it's basically just a blank slate. Mm-hmm. So you can do coconut oil, or you can do herbs, or, it's fun.
Nori.
Kyra, how about you?
I just recently read this book by Diana Abu Jabbar, and I hope I'm not butchering her name.
It's Abu Jabbar.
Abu Jabbar, thank you. She's part-time a professor at Portland State, and she wrote the book, The Language of Baklava, and it's memoirs of her growing up with an Irish Catholic mother and a Muslim Jordanian father, and she grew up part-time in New York City and part-time back in Jordan. And she talked the way she blends the discussions about food and her mother's people and their food, and then her father's people and their food. It's just amazing, and it makes you salivate while you're reading it. And of course, there's recipes for baklava, but there's also other recipes that are really, really great.
Ooh, I remember she used to do some food reviews or something. I remember reading her stuff and really admiring it. And then, I would love to pick up that book.
Yes, and she's a fabulous writer.
And Kyra, could you please make some gluten-free baklava?
I will put that on my list.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Well, thanks, ladies. That was really fun. Extra special thanks to all of you. Danielle Centoni, I am so glad we got you on this episode since your first 2 cookbooks were The Sugar Cube and Mother's Best, so sort of relating to 2 of our topics. And do you have another cookbook on the way? Am I remembering correctly?
This fall 2017, it'll be called Portland Cooks, and it's a collection of recipes from 40 Portland chefs and bars.
Wonderful. Can't wait to see that. And Kyra Bussanich, owner of Kyra's Bake Shop. And are you a lover of unicorns?
I am.
I think I picked that up from your social media. I think I picked that up from your social media feed. Yes, you are a unicorn because you just get in front of the camera and you just are so natural. I think you're probably 1 in a million.
Oh, well, thank you.
And Laura Russell, I'm so glad we got you in here with Kyra because I'm imagining what the 2 of you could do together. Laura, of course, is a gluten-free chef and cookbook author. So imagine Laura's savory, gluten-free Asian kitchen.
Kyra did all the desserts in my book.
Oh, did she?
So we have had our own little love fest.
Oh, my goodness.
We should do a new project, Laura. It's about time.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
I'd be happy to help taste test for that. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, listeners, we want you to savor the conversation with us. So please subscribe to The Four Top on iTunes, NPR One, or however you get your podcasts. And please leave us a rating. At facebook.com/thefourtop, you can suggest topics for us to discuss. And please like our page. And tweet us at @4top, all one word. Today's show was recorded in the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon, in the studios of OPB. You can read all about the show on the OPB website. Our producer is Alex Ward. Special thanks to OPB sound supervisor Stephen Cray, and our theme music was performed by the incomparable wine importer Kermit Lynch. I hope you can join us for our next episode, and please tell your friends about the Four Top. Bye-bye.
Nuit blanche, nuit blanche, nuit blanche.
I Laciado La Mancha.